For 18 years, Barron Trump never spoke publicly. Not once. While his siblings dominated headlines, testified in courtrooms, and defended their father on cable news, he stayed completely invisible. The media called him the Mystery Trump. Political analysts wondered what he knew. Conspiracy theorists created entire theories about why he was being kept silent. But nobody could get him to talk. Until yesterday. At 3:47 p.m. Eastern Time, that silence shattered. The youngest Trump son walked into a secure location in Manhattan and sat down for his first interview ever. No handlers, no lawyers from the Trump organization, no script, no preparation, just Barron, a camera, and questions he's been avoiding his entire life. What he revealed in the next 2 hours and 14 minutes isn't just family drama. This isn't about Thanksgiving dinners or sibling rivalries or father-son conflicts. This is about classified documents he saw being moved through Mar-a-Lago's service hallways at 2 a.m. This is about phone calls with Vladimir Putin he overheard from the residence dining room. This is about January 6th, planning meetings that happened in the White House family quarters while he was supposed to be doing AP government homework. This is about financial crimes he witnessed being discussed over breakfast. This is about witness intimidation he watched happen in real time. And here's what makes this absolutely devastating for Donald Trump. Barron Trump has no political career to protect, no business empire that depends on his father's name, no inheritance he's worried about losing, no Trump Organization paycheck keeping him quiet, no future presidential ambitions, no reason to lie. He's just an 18-year-old kid who grew up in the most powerful building in the world, watched things that made him deeply uncomfortable, kept notes about things that seemed wrong, and finally decided that the truth matters more than family loyalty. This isn't coming from Jack Smith and his team of federal prosecutors trying to build a RICO case. This isn't coming from Alvin Bragg in Manhattan trying to make a political name for himself. This isn't coming from Letitia James trying to dismantle the Trump Organization. This isn't coming from the January 6th committee trying to prove conspiracy. This is coming from Donald Trump's own son, his youngest child, the one he paraded around as proof he was still young and virile, the one he kept away from cameras specifically because of what that kid knew. And what Barron is saying right now is tearing apart the Republican Party in ways we haven't seen since Watergate. Senators who defended Trump through 2 impeachments are suddenly going silent. House Republicans who screamed about witch hunts are now refusing to comment. Fox News hosts who called every investigation a hoax are now trying to figure out how to spin a son testifying against his father. Trump's own legal team is in such complete chaos that 3 lawyers quit yesterday. 3 lawyers in one day after hearing what Barron said. Because here's the thing about Barron Trump that makes him different from every other witness we've seen. He has perfect memory. According to the interview, he's kept detailed journals since he was 14 years old. Not because he was planning to testify someday, but because his mother, Melania, told him to document everything, every strange conversation, every weird meeting, every time his father did something that seemed illegal. Melania knew. She knew that someday someone would need evidence, and she made sure her son was keeping track. So we're not talking about fuzzy memories from years ago. We're not talking about he said, she said, testimony that can be attacked as unreliable. We're talking about journal entries with dates, times, names, exact quotes. We're talking about a kid who wrote down that on November 9th, 2020, At 11:47 p.m., his father made a phone call to someone and said specific words about election fraud that prove Trump knew he lost. We're talking about detailed descriptions of classified documents that Barron saw in his father's personal office at Mar-a-Lago as recently as March 2023, months after the FBI raid. Documents that Trump swore under oath didn't exist. The interview drops tomorrow night. 60 minutes, 90 minutes of commercial-free testimony. CBS has already released a 2-minute preview clip, and that clip alone has sent Washington into absolute meltdown. In that preview, Barron describes walking past the Oval Office dining room on January 5, 2021, and hearing his father on the phone saying, "I don't care if it's legal, I just need pence to do it." That's Trump admitting he knew the plan was illegal, from his own son, on camera, with date and time stamps. But before we go any further, let me be real with you. You can't trust mainstream media to give you the full story on this. CNN is going to spin it one way. Fox is going to spin it another way. MSNBC is going to make it about their narrative. That's why we built Pump Politics. To bring you real stories, real context, no corporate spin, no agenda. If you want to stay ahead of what's really happening, join our free newsletter. We'll send the truth straight to your inbox every single day. Link is in the description. And if you just want to support independent journalism that actually cares about facts, join us. Be part of a community that refuses to be lied to. All right, let's get back to what Barron revealed and why this changes everything. So the question everyone is asking right now is, why? Why is Barron doing this? Why now? What finally pushed him to break 18 years of silence and destroy his own father? And the answer is more complicated and more devastating than anyone expected. According to sources close to the family, the breaking point came 3 weeks ago. January 2nd, 2026. Barron was home from NYU for winter break. He was staying at Mar-a-Lago in his usual bedroom on the 3rd floor, the one that overlooks the golf course. It was late, around 11:30 p.m. He couldn't sleep. So he went downstairs to the kitchen to get water. And that's when he heard his father's voice coming from the study. Trump was on the phone, and he was talking about Barron. Specifically, he was talking about how to use Barron as a shield if the federal investigations got worse. The person on the other end of the line, someone Barron recognized as one of his father's legal advisors, was suggesting that Trump could claim father-son privilege to block any potential testimony. They were discussing how to make sure Barron couldn't be subpoenaed, how to make sure that even if prosecutors tried to talk to him, there would be legal mechanisms in place to prevent it. But here's what made Barron's blood run cold. His father wasn't trying to protect him. Trump was trying to protect himself. The conversation wasn't about keeping Barron out of legal jeopardy. It was about making sure Barron couldn't tell anyone what he'd seen over the past 8 years. Barron stood in that hallway for 23 minutes. He listened to his father discuss him like he was a legal liability, like he was a problem to be managed, like he was evidence that needed to be suppressed. And at that moment, something broke inside him. The next morning, January 3rd, Barron called his mother. Melania was in New York. They talked for 2 hours. And according to people who know what was said on that call, Melania told her son something she'd been holding back for years. You have a choice to make. You can protect your father and become complicit in everything he's done, or you can tell the truth and live with yourself. Barron made his choice. By January 7th, his lawyer had contacted federal prosecutors. By January 10th, he'd signed a proffer agreement guaranteeing him immunity in exchange for testimony. By January 15th, he was sitting in a secure government facility, answering questions for 9 hours straight. And by January 20th, he'd agreed to do the 60 Minutes interview to make sure the American people heard directly from him, not through legal filings or leaked testimony. This wasn't a decision he made lightly. According to the interview preview, Barron breaks down crying multiple times. This is his father, the man who raised him, the man whose name he carries, and he's about to destroy him. But here's what makes this so powerful. Barron isn't doing this out of revenge. He's not doing this because he hates his father. He's doing this because he believes in something bigger than family loyalty. He's doing this because he watched his father break laws, abuse power, and undermine democracy, and he can't stay silent anymore. Let's talk about these journals, because this is what transforms Barron from just another witness into something prosecutors have been dreaming about for 4 years, a contemporaneous record keeper who documented everything in real time. Barron started keeping journals in March 2017. He was 11 years old. His family had just moved into the White House 2 months earlier. And according to the interview, Melania sat him down one night and gave him a leather-bound notebook. She told him, "Write down anything that seems strange, anything that makes you uncomfortable, anything you think might be important someday." Why would Melania do this? Why would a mother tell her 11-year-old son to document his father's potential crimes? Because Melania Trump is not stupid. She's been married to Donald Trump since 2005. She knows exactly who he is. She knows how he operates. She knows he cuts corners, bends rules, and does whatever serves his interests in the moment. And she knew that being in the White House, with that much power and that little oversight, would bring out the worst in him. So she protected her son the only way she could. She made sure he had evidence that could protect him if things went bad, evidence that could prove he wasn't involved, evidence that could show he was just a kid who witnessed things, not a participant. Barron filled 19 journals over 7 years. 19. Each one is roughly 200 pages. That's nearly 4,000 pages of handwritten observations from inside the Trump White House and Mar-a-Lago. Federal prosecutors now have all 19 journals. They've been authenticated by handwriting experts. They've been cross-referenced with other evidence, and they match up perfectly with timelines, phone records, and witness testimony. Here's what makes these journals so devastating. Barron wasn't writing them, thinking they'd ever be read by prosecutors or the public. He was just a kid processing what he was seeing. So the entries are raw, honest, and incredibly detailed. An entry from June 14, 2017 describes Barron walking into his father's private study and seeing documents spread across the desk. Trump quickly covered them up and told Barron to leave. But Barron had already seen enough. He wrote, "Dad had papers with red borders, the kind that said, 'Top Secret.' He got angry when I came in, asked me if I told anyone I saw them. I said no. He said, 'Good. Don't ever mention this.'" An entry from December 18, 2020, describes a conversation Barron overheard between his father and Rudy Giuliani. They were in the residence, talking about challenging election results in Pennsylvania. Barron wrote, "Rudy said they didn't have evidence, but they could make people believe there was fraud anyway. Dad laughed and said people will believe whatever he tells them to believe." An entry from January 4, 2021, 2 days before the Capitol riot, describes his father watching news coverage of protesters gathering in Washington. Barron wrote, "Dad said tomorrow is going to be wild. He was smiling, like he knew something was going to happen, like he wanted it to happen." These aren't vague memories. These are specific, dated, detailed accounts, written by a kid who didn't understand the full significance of what he was witnessing, but knew it felt wrong. And prosecutors have all of it. Now let's talk about Mar-a-Lago and the classified documents case, because what Barron reveals about this might be the most damaging testimony yet. You remember the FBI raid in August 2022. Agents recovered more than 300 classified documents from Mar-a-Lago. Trump claimed he'd declassified everything. His lawyers claimed they'd returned everything the government requested. The National Archives said documents were still missing. Barron Trump just confirmed the National Archives was right. According to the interview preview, Barron describes seeing classified documents in his father's personal office at Mar-a-Lago as recently as March 2023, 7 months after the FBI raid, documents that Trump's lawyers swore under oath didn't exist. In the preview clip, Barron describes the scene in detail. "I went into his office to ask him something. He was at his desk. There were folders spread out, red borders, classification markings. I could see them clearly. He saw me looking and closed the folders immediately. Then he told me I didn't see anything and I should forget I was ever in that room." But Barron didn't forget. He went back to his room and wrote it down. Date, March the 17th, 2023, time, 2:34 p.m. Location, private office, 2nd floor, Mar-a-Lago. Description, approximately 12 to 15 folders with red borders, classification markings visible on at least 3 of them. That journal entry, if it holds up under scrutiny, proves Trump was still holding classified documents 7 months after the FBI raid. It proves his lawyers lied to federal investigators. It proves obstruction of justice, and it's coming from his own son. But here's where it gets even worse for Trump. Barron also describes what happened to those documents. According to the interview 3 days after Barron saw them, on March 20th, 2023, he saw 2 men he didn't recognize loading boxes into a black SUV in the middle of the night. He was up late, studying for exams. He heard noise outside. He looked out his window and saw the SUV parked near the service entrance. 2 men in suits loading boxes from a dolly into the back. Barron wrote it down. Date, time, description of the vehicle, description of the men, everything. Federal prosecutors are now investigating whether those documents were moved to a different location to avoid being discovered. They're looking into who those men were, where that SUV went, and whether Trump orchestrated the removal of evidence. And the only reason they know any of this is because an 18-year-old kid kept journals his mother told him to write. Let's talk about January 6th. Because Barron Trump was in the White House that day. He was 14 years old, and he saw things that have never been reported before. According to the interview, Barron woke up around 9:30 a.m. on January 6th, 2021. He could hear his father's voice coming from downstairs, loud, agitated, excited. He got dressed and went down to the dining room for breakfast. His father was watching TV. Fox News was showing crowds gathering near the Capitol. Trump was on the phone, talking to someone about crowd size, about how many people showed up, about how this was going to be the biggest protest in American history. Barron ate breakfast and went back upstairs to do homework. He had a history paper due. But around 11 a.m. he heard shouting coming from his father's study. He walked down the hall and stood outside the door. He could hear his father arguing with someone. Later he realized it was Mike Pence on the phone. In the interview, Barron describes what he heard. "My father was yelling. He said Mike was being weak. He said Mike had one job, and if he didn't do it, there would be consequences. He said Mike would regret it." Then he hung up and threw the phone across the room. That phone call has been reported before, but this is the first time someone who was physically present has described it in detail. and Barron wrote it down that day. January 6th, 2021, 11:17 a.m. Dad threatened Mike Pence on the phone, said there would be consequences if Mike didn't do what he wanted. But here's what nobody knew until now. After Trump hung up with Pence, he made another call. Barron couldn't hear who was on the other end, but he heard his father say, "It's happening. They're going to march to the Capitol. Let them. Don't stop them." Who was Trump talking to? Who received that instruction? Prosecutors don't know yet. But they're about to find out, because phone records will show exactly who Trump called at that time, and Barron's testimony gives them probable cause to subpoena those records. Around 1 p.m., Barron heard screaming coming from the TV in his father's study. He went to see what was happening. The study door was open. His father was watching live footage of protesters breaking through barriers at the Capitol. And according to Barron, Trump was smiling. He looked satisfied, like this was exactly what he wanted. Barron stood in the doorway for several minutes, watching his father watch the violence unfold. And at one point, someone on TV said the mob had breached the Capitol building. Trump leaned back in his chair and said, "Good." Barron wrote it down. January 6th, 2021, 1:14 p.m. Dad is watching the riot on TV. He looks happy about it. He said good when they broke into the Capitol. For the next 3 hours, Trump did nothing. He didn't call the National Guard. He didn't tell the protesters to leave. He sat in his study, watching TV, making phone calls, while the Capitol was under siege. Barron stayed in his room. He was scared. He didn't understand what was happening, but he knew it was bad. He could hear staffers running through the halls, panicking. He could hear people shouting. And through it all, his father stayed in that study, watching. Finally, around 4:17 p.m., Trump recorded a video message telling the protesters to go home. But even in that message, he told them they were special and he loved them. Barron wrote in his journal that night, "I don't understand why Dad won't stop them. People are getting hurt. The Capitol is being destroyed, and he won't tell them to stop. He just keeps saying they're right to be angry." That journal entry, written by a 14-year-old kid in real time on January 6th, might be the most powerful evidence yet that Trump wanted the violence to continue, that he approved of it, that he thought it would help him stay in power. Now let's talk about the financial fraud, because Barron didn't just witness political crimes. He witnessed financial crimes, too, and he's been documenting those since he was 11 years old. According to the interview, financial discussions happened constantly in the Trump household. At breakfast, at dinner, during car rides, Trump would talk about property valuations, tax strategies, loan applications, and insurance claims like it was normal conversation, and a lot of what he said was illegal. Barron describes one conversation from 2018. He was 12 years old. The family was having breakfast at Trump Tower. His father was on the phone with someone from the Trump organization discussing a property appraisal. Trump said the property was worth $500 million for the loan application, but they should list it at $50 million for tax purposes. Barron didn't understand what that meant at the time, but he wrote it down anyway. And now, prosecutors understand exactly what it means: fraud. In another entry from 2019, Barron describes overhearing his father tell someone to create an invoice for work that was never done, so they could justify moving money between accounts. Again, Barron didn't understand the significance, but he documented it. These entries corroborate what prosecutors in New York have been investigating for years: systematic financial fraud across the Trump organization, inflating property values to get loans. deflating property values to avoid taxes, creating fake invoices to hide money movement. All of it illegal, all of it documented by a kid who was just writing down what he heard. But here's the most damaging revelation. Barron describes a conversation from 2017 where Trump explicitly told his children how to lie to auditors. It was during a family meeting at Mar-a-Lago. Trump was explaining how the business worked. And according to Barron, Trump said, "If anyone asks questions about valuations, just say you don't know the details. Say the accountants handle that. Never admit you know how we set the numbers." That's consciousness of guilt. That's Trump admitting he knows the valuations are fraudulent and instructing his children to help cover it up. And Barron wrote it down. Federal prosecutors in Manhattan now have testimony from Trump's own son that Trump knowingly committed financial fraud and taught his children to lie about it. Here's where the story gets even more complicated. Barron's decision to testify has completely fractured the Trump family. Don Jr. released a statement yesterday calling Barron a traitor who sold out his family for media attention. Eric Trump went on Fox News and claimed Barron was brainwashed by liberal professors at NYU. Ivanka has stayed silent, but sources close to her say she's devastated and feels betrayed. Melania, on the other hand, has fully supported her son's decision. According to people close to the family, Melania told Barron, "You're doing the right thing. Your father made his choices. You don't have to pay for them."